The dust rose in tired little clouds behind the stagecoach as it groaned to a stop at the edge of Willow Creek Ranch, and Clara May Whitfield felt her heart sink in a way she couldn't explain. She pressed her gloved hands together in her lap, staring out at the wide stretch of land that seemed to go on forever, golden grass bending under the weight of the wind, weathered fence posts leaning like old men too stubborn to fall, and beyond it all a house that stood alone against the sky. It wasn't grand. It wasn't welcoming. It was simply there, solid and silent, like it had learned long ago not to expect much from the world. "This is it," the driver said, already reaching for her single suitcase. Willow Creek Ranch. Clara swallowed. She had imagined many things on the long journey west: warm kitchens, grateful employers, a place where her hands could stay busy so her thoughts wouldn't wander back to all she'd lost. What she hadn't imagined was this vast emptiness, this feeling that she was stepping into someone else's grief without knowing its shape. She stepped down from the coach, her boots crunching against the dirt, and pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The wind carried the smell of hay and wood smoke sharp and clean. Somewhere far off a horse whinnied. Other than that, the ranch was quiet. A man stood waiting near the porch. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, his stance steady like the land itself had taught him how to stand. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his eyes. But when he lifted his head, Clara caught a glimpse of them, gray, tired, and guarded, as though he'd learned the hard way that hope was something to keep locked away. His beard was neatly trimmed, his shirt clean but worn, the sleeves rolled up as if he was never truly done working. "You must be Clara," he said, his voice low and measured. "Yes, sir," she replied quickly. "Clara May Whitfield." He nodded once. Ethan Cole. That was it. No welcome, no smile, just a name offered like a fact. She told herself not to take it personally. The advertisement he'd placed in the paper had been short and to the point. Cook needed. Room and board provided. One child. No flowery words. No promises. It was work, and Clara had learned not to expect kindness wrapped around necessity. "I can take my own bag," she said when he reached for her suitcase. "I've got it," he replied, already lifting it with ease. As they walked toward the house, Clara noticed the details. The porch steps worn smooth by years of boots, the rocking chair sitting empty near the door, a small pair of scuffed shoes tucked neatly beside it. Her gaze lingered there, a strange tightness forming in her chest. One child, she thought again. Inside, the house smelled faintly of soap and old wood. It was tidy, though not lovingly, so more like someone had cleaned out of obligation rather than care. The kitchen was simple but functional. A sturdy table, a cast-iron stove, shelves, lined with well-used dishes. Clara felt a flicker of relief. This at least she understood. "You'll be cooking 3 meals a day," Ethan said, setting her suitcase down near the door. "Nothing fancy, just good food." "I can do that," Clara replied softly. "I've cooked for larger households than this." "I read your letter," he added after a pause. "You worked in Cheyenne. And before that?" "Missouri." "Yes, sir." She hesitated, then added, "I won't disappoint you." He looked at her then, really looked, as if weighing her words. "I'm not hard to please." Something about the way he said it made Clara think that wasn't entirely true, that maybe he simply didn't allow himself to want much anymore. Before she could respond, small footsteps sounded from the hallway. Clara turned just as a little girl peeked around the corner. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, her dark hair pulled into 2 uneven braids, her dress patched at the hem but clean. What struck Clara most were her eyes, wide, watchful, and far too serious for someone so young. The girl studied Clara with quiet intensity, as if she were something fragile that might break if examined too closely. "That's Lily," Ethan said, his voice softening in a way that surprised Clara. "My daughter." Clara smiled instinctively and lowered herself slightly, so she wasn't towering over the child. "Hello, Lily. It's very nice to meet you." Lily didn't answer. She stepped fully into the room and moved closer to her father, one small hand curling into his shirt. Her eyes never left Clara's face. "She don't talk much," Ethan said. "Not to strangers." "That's all right," Clara replied gently. "I'm a stranger now, but maybe not forever." At that, Lily's brow furrowed as if she were considering something important. Ethan cleared his throat. "I'll show you your room." The guest room was small but bright. with a single window that looked out over the fields. A narrow bed sat against the wall, a quilt folded neatly at the foot. Clara ran her fingers over it, noting the careful stitches. Someone had taken the time to make this. "You can settle in," Ethan said from the doorway. "Supper's at 6. I usually eat late." "But Lily," he stopped, then finished. "She needs regular meals." "I understand." When he left, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The journey, the uncertainty, the weight of starting over, it all pressed down on her at once. But beneath it was something else. A quiet sense that this place, for better or worse, was about to change her. That afternoon, she unpacked and familiarized herself with the kitchen. She moved with practiced ease, chopping vegetables, setting bread to rise, letting the rhythm of work calm her thoughts. Cooking had always been her refuge. When her husband died 2 years ago now, though it still felt like yesterday, it had been the only thing that kept her moving forward. There had been no children, just dreams that ended too soon. She pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the sizzle of onions in the pan. She felt Lily's presence before she saw her. Turning, Clara found the little girl standing in the doorway, watching silently. She hadn't made a sound. "Would you like to help me?" Clara asked. Lily shook her head but didn't leave. "That's okay," Clara said with a smile. "You can just watch." Minutes passed in companionable quiet. Clara worked. Lily watched. Occasionally, the girl's gaze drifted to Clara's hands, as if memorizing the way they moved. Finally, Lily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you staying?" The question caught Clara off guard. "Yeah," she said after a moment. "If your father wants me to." Lily nodded once solemnly, as if this confirmed something she'd already decided. That evening, they ate together at the table. Ethan spoke little, focused on his meal. But Clara noticed the way he watched. Lily, when he thought no one was looking, how his eyes softened, how his shoulders eased just slightly when the girl ate without protest. Lily, for her part, ate quietly, glancing at Clara every so often with an unreadable expression. After supper, Clara washed the dishes while Ethan stepped outside. Lily lingered at the table, swinging her legs. "Your cooking is good," she said suddenly. "Thank you," Clara replied, warmth spreading through her chest. Lily slid off the chair and walked closer, stopping just a few feet away. She looked up at Clara, her eyes shining with something that made Clara's breath catch. "I picked you," Lily said. Clara frowned gently. "Picked me?" "For Daddy," Lily whispered, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "I picked you to be my mommy." The words hit Clara like a sudden gust of wind, knocking the air from her lungs. Before she could respond, Lily turned and ran down the hall, leaving Clara standing there, her hands trembling in the dishwater, her heart pounding with a mix of shock, sorrow, and something dangerously close to hope. Clara stood frozen long after Lily's footsteps faded down the hall, the dishcloth limp in her hands, water cooling around her fingers, as if the world itself had slowed to watch her reaction. "I picked you to be my mommy." The words echoed again and again in her mind, soft and fragile and impossibly heavy. She had heard many things in her life, cruel truths, broken promises, polite rejections, but never something like that. Never something so innocent and so devastating all at once. She turned off the pump and wiped her hands on her apron, forcing herself to breathe. Lily was a child, a lonely one. Children said things without understanding the weight they carried. Clara told herself this firmly, like a lesson she had to memorize before it slipped away. Still, her chest ached, a dull, familiar pain blooming behind her ribs, the same one she'd felt at freshly dug graves and quiet houses that no longer felt like homes. She carried the last plate to the cupboard and set it carefully in place, as if any sudden movement might shatter something unseen. When she turned, Ethan was standing in the doorway. "How is she?" he asked. Clara hesitated. "She ate well." He nodded, satisfied, and stepped into the kitchen. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt thicker now, charged with words Clara didn't know how to say and questions she was afraid to ask. "She sometimes wanders after supper," Ethan said, his gaze drifting toward the hallway. "Gets restless." "I don't mind," Clara replied. "I can keep an eye on her if you'd like." His eyes flicked back to her, searching. "You don't have to do more than you're paid for." "I know," she said softly, "but I don't mind." That earned her a long look, one that made Clara feel as though he were trying to decide whether kindness was a risk worth taking. Finally, he nodded once and turned toward the door. "I've got chores. Don't stay up too late." When he was gone, Clara leaned against the counter and closed her eyes. She could still feel the ghost of Lily's words against her heart, fragile and dangerous. She whispered them aloud once, barely moving her lips, and felt tears sting her. Eyes, mommy, it was a word she had once imagined hearing in another life, spoken by a child that would never be. She pressed a hand to her mouth until the ache eased enough for her to move again. Later that night, she heard soft footsteps outside her room. "Lily," she called quietly. The door creaked open and the little girl slipped inside. Clutching a ragged cloth doll, she stood there uncertainly, the bravado of earlier gone, replaced by something shy and vulnerable. "I can't sleep," Lily murmured. Clara's instinct was to look toward the hall, to call for Ethan. Instead, she knelt so she was eye level with the child. "Do you have bad dreams?" Lily nodded. "Would you like me to sit with you for a bit?" Another nod, smaller this time. They padded down the hall together, Clara's hand hovering near Lily's shoulder, unsure whether she was allowed to touch. Lily climbed into her bed, curling around the doll, and Clara pulled the quilt up to her chin. "Can you tell me a story?" Lily asked. Clara smiled faintly. "I can try." She sat on the edge of the bed and told a simple story about a brave little bird who built her nest in a new place. Even though the wind was strong and the sky felt too big, Lily listened intently, her eyes growing heavy. "My mama used to sing," Lily whispered as sleep tugged at her. "She smelled like soap." Clara's throat tightened. "That sounds like a very nice smell." "She went away," Lily said, her voice flat in a way that told Clara this was an old wound, pressed down and smoothed over too many times. "Daddy doesn't talk about her." Clara swallowed. Sometimes grown-ups don't talk about things because they hurt too much. Lily considered this, then nodded. "That's why I picked you." Clara's heart stumbled. "Lily, you smell like soap too," the child said, already half asleep. "And you don't look sad all the time." Clara stayed until Lily's breathing evened out, until the small hand clutching the doll relaxed. When she finally slipped out of the room, she felt as though she were carrying something precious and unbearably fragile inside her. Sleep did not come easily that night. Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind move through the eaves, thinking of Lily's serious eyes and Ethan's guarded silence. She wondered how long it had been since laughter had lived in this house, since someone had cooked a meal out of love instead of duty. Morning came early at Willow Creek Ranch. Clara was already up when Ethan entered the kitchen, the smell of coffee filling the air. "You didn't have to start so soon," he said, sounding almost uncomfortable. "I wanted to," she replied. "It helps me think." He watched her pour batter onto the skillet, the quiet competence of her movements seeming to unsettle him. "Lily sleep all right?" "Yes," Clara said carefully. She had a bad dream, but she settled. Ethan stiffened. "She didn't bother you?" "No," Clara said quickly. "I didn't mind at all." He said nothing for a long moment, then muttered, "She shouldn't be bothering you." "She wasn't," Clara repeated, meeting his eyes. "She's a child who misses her mother." The words hung between them like a challenge. Ethan's jaw tightened and he looked away. "You don't know anything about that," he said quietly. "You're right," Clara replied, her voice gentle. "I don't, but I know what it's like to miss someone who's gone." That made him look at her again. Really look this time. Something in his expression shifted, not softening exactly, but cracking just enough to let something human show through. Breakfast passed in relative quiet. Lily was more talkative than the night before, asking Clara small, earnest questions about how to flip pancakes and whether bread always took so long to rise. Ethan listened without comment, but Clara noticed the way his eyes followed their interaction, wary and curious all at once. After the meal, Ethan cleared his throat. "I should say something." Clara paused, dish in hand. "This arrangement," he continued. "You're here to cook. That's all." "I understand," Clara said, though her heart sank. "Lily," he stopped, then started again. "She gets ideas. You shouldn't encourage them." Clara thought of the small voice whispering, "I picked you," of the lonely hope behind it. "I won't lie to her," she said softly, "but I won't promise her anything I can't give." Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "That's fair." As he left for the day's work, Clara watched him go, her mind heavy with unspoken thoughts. She had come here to cook, to survive, to keep moving forward. She had not come to be chosen by a child's fragile hope or to stir feelings she'd buried with her past. And yet as Lily tugged on her apron and smiled up at her, Clara felt something shift inside her, something that told her this job might cost her far more than she was prepared to lose, and might offer something she'd never dared to want again. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. Clara rose before dawn, the sky still bruised with night, and moved quietly through the house as if afraid to wake old memories that slept in the walls. She baked bread, stirred porridge, and learned the small peculiarities of the kitchen, the stubborn stove that needed coaxing, the drawer that stuck unless you lifted it just so. With each passing morning, the house seemed to breathe a little easier, as though it recognized purpose again. Lily began to hover near her more often. She followed Clara from room to room, not always speaking, just watching with those thoughtful eyes, absorbing every movement. Sometimes she helped in small, clumsy ways, handing over utensils, carefully placing napkins on the table, humming tunelessly as she worked. Other times she simply sat nearby, her presence quiet but constant, like a promise she didn't yet know how to voice aloud. Ethan noticed. He noticed the way Lily laughed now, soft and surprised like she wasn't used to the sound. He noticed how she finished her meals instead of pushing them away, how she slept through the night without waking him with tears or trembling, and he noticed how Clara seemed to fit into the house with unsettling ease, as though she had always belonged there. It made him uneasy. One afternoon, as Clara hung laundry in the yard, Ethan approached her, his boots crunching against the gravel. She turned, startled, brushing her hands on her apron. "Am I doing something wrong?" she asked before he could speak. He shook his head no. "Then, she's getting attached," he said bluntly, nodding toward the house where Lily's face hovered at the window. Clara followed his gaze, her heart tightening. "She's lonely." "So were we," Ethan replied, his voice hardening. "And look how that turned out." Clara held her ground. "Children don't stop needing love just because it might hurt later." He exhaled sharply. "You don't understand." "Then help me," she said, surprising herself with the firmness of her tone. "Help me understand." For a moment she thought he might walk away. Instead, he removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that stripped away some of his rigid composure. "My wife died when Lily was 3, he said quietly. "Fever. Took her in less than a week." Clara's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." "She kept the house warm," he continued, staring at the horizon. "Not just the fire, everything else. After she was gone, I didn't know how to replace that. I still don't." "You're not replacing her," Clara said gently. "No one ever could." He looked at her then, his eyes dark with something like fear. "That's what scares me." They stood in silence, the wind tugging at the laundry between them like restless spirits. Lily's small hand pressed against the glass, watching. That night, Clara found Lily sitting on the porch steps, her chin resting in her palms. "What are you doing out here?" Clara asked. "Waiting," Lily said. "For what?" "For you," she replied simply. Clara sat beside her, the wood cool beneath them. "You don't have to wait for me." Lily tilted her head. "I know, I just like to." Clara smiled, though her heart ached. "Lily, when you said what you said before, about picking me, I meant it," Lily said quickly, fear flashing across her face. "Did I do something bad?" "No," Clara said at once. "You didn't do anything bad." "Then why does Daddy look sad when I talk about it?" Clara searched for the right words. "Because your daddy loved your mama very much. And sometimes loving someone again feels scary when you've lost someone before." Lily frowned. "You won't go away?" The question sliced through Clara's chest. She thought of her letter of employment, of the unspoken understanding that this was temporary. She thought of her own grief, the wall she'd built to survive. "I don't plan to," she said honestly. "But sometimes grown-up things don't turn out the way we hope." Lily considered this, then leaned her head against Clara's arm. "I still choose you." Clara closed her eyes, the weight of those words settling deep inside her. Later that evening, Ethan watched from the doorway. As Lily fell asleep with her head resting in Clara's lap, the book forgotten in Clara's hand. For the first time in years, the house felt full. Not crowded, not loud, just alive. It terrified him. After Clara carried Lily to bed, Ethan lingered in the kitchen.
"You're changing things," he said quietly.
"I'm not trying to," Clara replied. "That's what worries me." She met his gaze. Things were already broken. He had no answer for that. As the lamplight flickered and the wind whispered through the fields, Clara returned to her room and sat on the edge of the bed, her heart heavy with choices she hadn't known she'd be asked to make. She had come here to cook, to earn her keep, to remain invisible. Instead, she had been seen chosen by a child who believed in the impossible. Outside, Lily slept peacefully, and Ethan stared into the dark, wrestling with a fear that felt dangerously close to hope. And somewhere deep inside Clara, a quiet truth took root. This job was no longer just about food and shelter. It was about whether three broken hearts could learn to beat together again, or whether loving them would be the greatest risk she would ever take.